The wrecking crew at 742 Fifth Avenue found the chamber 3 days into demolition. Behind ornate ballroom paneling, past 2 feet of brick, they discovered a skeleton in rotted silk. The medical examiner noted something impossible. The dental work matched Constance Vanir, the socialite who died in 1905. Before we dive into the story, what's the darkest case you've ever heard or experienced? Write it in the comments. Let's compare notes. Also, tell us where you're watching from today and what time is it right now. We're building a community of truth seekers who aren't afraid of the dark. Now, let's continue with the story. The spring of 1932 brought change to Manhattan's most exclusive addresses. The Vanir mansion, vacant since 1928, had been sold to developers planning a modern apartment tower. The building stood as one of the last remnants of Gilded Age excess, its limestone facade and copper roof already appearing antiquated against the Art Deco structures rising throughout the city. On March 14th, workers began interior demolition. The ballroom occupied the mansion's entire western wing, its walls covered in hand-painted silk panels depicting European gardens. Foreman Henry Drucker assigned his crew to strip the paneling carefully, as dealers had already purchased the antique materials for salvage. Thomas Brennan, 26 years old and new to the crew, worked on the north wall that Tuesday afternoon. He had removed 3 panels when his crowbar struck something unexpected. Instead of the solid masonry he anticipated, the wall behind the silk gave way with a hollow sound. Brennan called Drucker over to investigate. What they initially believed to be a storage cavity proved far more substantial. Behind the decorative wall lay another wall of brick, constructed crudely compared to the mansion's original craftsmanship. The mortar showed signs of age, but appeared significantly newer than the building's 1878 construction date. Drucker ordered his men to carefully remove several bricks. The smell reached them first. Not the sharp odor of recent decay, but something older, dustier, mixed with the scent of long stagnant air. When Brennan shone his electric torch through the opening, he saw a chamber roughly 10 feet square. The beam illuminated an iron bed frame, a small table, and scattered across the floor, dozens of tin containers that had once held food. Then the light found the dress. Heavy silk, once ivory or pale yellow, lay in a heap near what appeared to be a hidden door panel. The fabric had deteriorated significantly, but its quality remained evident. Brennan moved the torch beam upward and stopped. The skeleton sprawled beside the dress wore fragments of lace at the wrists and throat. Long hair, still partially attached to the skull, spread across the floorboards. Drucker immediately halted all work and telephoned the police. By evening, the mansion swarmed with investigators. Detective Raymond Lyons, who had worked homicide for 15 years, examined the scene with growing confusion. The chamber showed clear signs of long-term occupancy. Books lined a makeshift shelf, their spines showing titles from the 1890s. A collection of needlework, yellowed with age, sat in a basket. Most disturbing were the marks on the walls near the concealed entrance, deep scratches suggesting desperate attempts at escape. The medical examiner arrived near midnight. Dr. Paul Vickers had seen countless bodies in his career, but this case presented unusual challenges. The remains showed no obvious signs of violence, though determining cause of death after nearly 3 decades proved difficult. What caught his attention were the bone structure and dental characteristics. The woman had received expensive dental work, including gold inlays uncommon, except among the wealthy. The following morning, newspapers across New York ran sensational headlines about the discovery. Reporters descended on the demolition site and speculation ran wild. Who was this woman? How long had she been sealed in the wall? Most puzzling of all, why had no one reported her missing? Detective Lyons methodically documented everything found in the chamber. Among the books, he discovered a leather-bound volume containing pressed flowers and handwritten notes. One entry, dated September 10, 1905, read simply, "Constance married today. I heard everything. The music was beautiful." That name sparked recognition. Lyons retrieved archived society pages from the New York Times. In June of 1905, Constance Vanderveer had married William Ashford in a ceremony held in the ballroom of this very mansion. The bride's photograph showed a striking young woman, elegant and composed. 3 months later, another article announced Constance's death from influenza. Lyons stared at the photograph, then at the skeleton in the sealed room. The measurements, the dental work, the bone structure. The woman in the wall could easily be Constance Vanderveer's twin. He pulled property records for the mansion. The Vanderveer family had owned it from 1872 until 1926. Cornelius and Edith Vanderveer, the final residents, had both died in 1927, but their records showed only one daughter. Only Constance. Detective Lyons spent the next week buried in archives, reconstructing the Vanderveer family's carefully curated public image. What emerged was a portrait of Manhattan aristocracy at its most powerful, a family whose name appeared in society columns with remarkable frequency during the final decades of the 19th century. Cornelius Vanderveer had built his fortune in shipping and real estate, arriving in New York from Boston in 1868 with inherited capital and ruthless business instincts. By 1875, he controlled 3 major shipping lines and owned properties throughout Lower Manhattan. His marriage to Edith Carrington in 1876 united 2 prominent families, and society reporters celebrated the union as a perfect match of wealth and breeding. The couple established themselves at 742 Fifth Avenue in 1878. The mansion they commissioned became a showcase of Gilded Age excess, featuring marble imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers from France, and woodwork carved by European craftsmen. The annual Vanderveer Christmas Ball attracted governors, senators, and industrial titans. Invitations were coveted, refusals nearly impossible. Lyons found Constance's birth announcement in the Times from March 23, 1880. The notice, brief and formal, stated that Mrs. Cornelius Vanderveer had been delivered of a daughter at the family's country estate in Westchester County. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Sheffield, was noted as one of New York's most respected obstetricians, serving exclusively wealthy families who valued discretion above all else. No mention of twins, no indication of complications. Just one healthy daughter. Constance's childhood appeared in carefully orchestrated glimpses throughout society coverage. A photograph from 1887 showed her at 7 years old, posed with her parents at a charity function. Another from 1891 captured her at a coming-of-age party for another prominent family's daughter. Each image showed a poised, well-dressed child, always alone, never with siblings, or even many other children. Her formal debut in December of 1898 generated extensive press coverage. The Times devoted half a column to describing her gown, white silk with seed pearls, and noting her grace during the traditional waltz with her father. Other debutantes that season included daughters of the Astors and Whitneys, yet Constance's beauty drew particular attention. One society columnist described her as possessing that rare combination of classical features and genuine warmth that distinguishes true elegance from mere breeding. Throughout 1899 and 1900, Constance appeared at every significant social event. Opera openings, charity galas, summer gatherings in Newport. The society pages tracked her movements with the attention typically reserved for European royalty. Eligible bachelors pursued her openly, but she remained unmarried as years passed, leading to speculation about her particular standards, or perhaps her father's protective nature. Lyons located photograph after photograph. Constance at 20, at 22, at 24, always immaculately dressed, always smiling with perfect composure. In later images from 1903 and 1904, he noticed something subtle. Her smile remained beautiful, but her eyes carried a weight that hadn't been present in earlier pictures. A tightness around her mouth suggested strain beneath the polished surface. The engagement announcement appeared in March of 1904. William Ashford, 31 years old, was heir to the Ashford Railroad empire, his family's wealth rivaling that of the Vanderbilts. The match thrilled society commentators, who proclaimed it the union of the decade. Cornelius Vanderveer told reporters his daughter had found a worthy partner, someone whose character matched his distinction. Wedding preparations consumed the next 15 months. The ceremony was scheduled for June 10, 1905, to be held in the mansion's grand ballroom with a reception for 500 guests. Newspapers ran weekly updates on dress fittings, menu selections, and the guest list that read like a directory of American power. What the society pages never mentioned, what no reporter ever discovered, was the other daughter. The twin who shared Constance's face, but not her freedom. The girl born the same day, in the same room, who would spend her entire life hidden within the walls of the very mansion where her sister danced and smiled and eventually married. Lyons closed the archive folders and returned to the demolition site. Workers had fully exposed the sealed chamber now, and he stood in the ballroom looking at the hole in the wall. The wedding had taken place here, right here, with Clara listening from her prison just feet away. He needed to find Dr. Sheffield's records. Someone had delivered those twins, and someone had agreed to hide one of them from the world. Dr. Marcus Sheffield had died in 1923, but his professional papers remained in the possession of his son, Dr. Robert Sheffield, who maintained a practice on Park Avenue. When Detective Lyons arrived at his office on a rainy April morning, the younger Sheffield seemed unsurprised by the visit. "I wondered when someone would come asking about the Vanderveers," Robert said, leading Lyons into a book-lined study. "After I read about the discovery in the papers, I went through my father's old records, found something he'd kept separate from his regular files." He produced a leather portfolio tied with string, its contents obviously untouched for decades. Inside, Lyons found a detailed medical journal spanning March of 1880, written in precise handwriting that documented a birth unlike any other in Sheffield's practice. The entries began on March 20th. Edith Vanderveer had gone into labor at the Westchester estate at 4 in the morning. Sheffield arrived by 6, finding his patient's contractions strong and regular. The delivery proceeded normally until the first infant emerged at 8:30. A girl, healthy, crying vigorously. Sheffield recorded her weight at 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Then, unexpectedly, the contractions resumed. Edith was carrying twins, though no previous examination had suggested this possibility. The second child arrived 23 minutes later, and Sheffield's notes became more detailed, more clinical, and notably more troubled. The second girl weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. She breathed and cried, but Sheffield immediately noted abnormalities. The right side of her face showed asymmetry, her right eye positioned slightly lower than the left. Her muscle tone appeared inconsistent, with her right arm showing limited movement. When he performed basic reflex tests, her responses were uneven, suggesting what he termed possible neurological complications of unknown origin. Sheffield's entry for that afternoon revealed the conversation that sealed one child's fate. Cornelius Vanderveer had demanded a private consultation. The physician's notes recorded the exchange with uncomfortable precision. Mr. Vanderveer insisted that only one child could be acknowledged. He stated his family's position in society would not permit the existence of an imperfect heir. When I attempted to explain that the second child's conditions, while concerning, did not preclude a reasonable quality of life, he became adamant. He offered me $5,000 to omit any mention of the second birth from all records and to provide ongoing care with absolute discretion. $5,000 in 1880 represented more than most physicians earned in 5 years. Sheffield had accepted, though his journal entries revealed his moral struggle. He recorded every visit to the Westchester estate over the following months, documenting the child he privately called Clara, though the Vanderveers refused to name her officially. His notes showed Clara's development. By 6 months, her cognitive abilities appeared normal, despite her physical challenges. She smiled, responded to voices, and showed recognition of familiar faces. The facial asymmetry remained pronounced, and her right side continued to show weakness. But Sheffield found her alert and, in his words, possessed of a gentle temperament that seems aware of her circumstances, even at this tender age. The entries detailed how the Vanderveers managed the deception. They kept Clara in a nursery suite, accessible only through the family's private quarters. A nurse named Ida Kessler was hired with a contract that included severe financial penalties for any disclosure. Sheffield visited monthly, always after dark, his carriage arriving through the service entrance. By 1882, when the family moved permanently to the Fifth Avenue mansion, Clara had been transported in a covered carriage during the night. Sheffield's notes indicated she was installed in rooms on the 4th floor, far from the areas where guests were entertained. Constance, he observed during one visit, had already learned not to mention her sister in the presence of adults. The final entry came from March of 1895, when Clara turned 15. Sheffield wrote that she had developed into an intelligent young woman, despite her isolation. She read extensively, wrote with clear penmanship, and maintained what he called remarkable grace, given her physical limitations and the cruelty of her confinement. My father stopped seeing them after that, Robert Sheffield told Lyons. He told me once, years later, that he regretted taking Vanderveer's money, said some prices are too high, no matter the sum. Lyons carefully photographed each page. The journal proved Clara's existence and documented the conspiracy that erased her from history. But it also raised darker questions. If Sheffield had stopped his visits in 1895, who had cared for Clara in the decade that followed? And who had decided she should be sealed in the wall? Finding Ida Kessler proved easier than Lyons anticipated. The former nurse, now 78 years old, lived in a modest boarding house in Brooklyn. When he arrived at her door, she studied his badge for a long moment before speaking. "I've been expecting someone for 27 years, she said quietly. "Come in, detective." Her room was small but tidy, filled with books and a single photograph on the mantel. A young girl with an asymmetrical face smiled at the camera, holding a doll. Kessler saw Lyons looking at it. "That's Clara, taken on her 10th birthday, 1890. The only photograph of her that exists, I believe. I took it with a camera I purchased myself, against Mr. Vanderveer's explicit orders." She settled into her chair and began to talk, her memory sharp despite her age. She had started working for the Vandiviers in 1881, hired specifically to care for the hidden daughter. The position paid exceptionally well, 3 times the normal rate for a private nurse, but the contract she signed contained clauses unlike anything she had encountered before. Disclosure of Clara's existence would result in immediate termination and a penalty of $10,000, an impossible sum designed to ensure permanent silence. She was forbidden from discussing her work with other household staff. Her days off were staggered to ensure Clara was never left alone, rotating with a second nurse whose identity Kessler never learned. Clara lived in 4 rooms on the mansion's top floor, Kessler explained. A bedroom, a small sitting room, a bathroom, and what we called the schoolroom. The windows were fitted with bars painted to look decorative, but they were iron underneath. She could see Fifth Avenue, watch the carriages and the people, but she could never go down there. The daily routine rarely varied. Clara woke at 7, dressed with Kessler's help due to her limited mobility on her right side, and ate breakfast. Mornings were devoted to lessons. Kessler had been a school teacher before becoming a nurse, and she taught Clara reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and literature. The girl proved remarkably intelligent, often finishing books in single sittings and asking questions that revealed sophisticated thinking. Afternoons brought needlework, drawing, and more reading. Clara particularly loved novels, losing herself in stories of places she would never visit and lives she would never lead. She kept detailed journals, filling dozens of volumes with her observations, thoughts, and careful descriptions of everything she saw from her window. She tracked the seasons by the trees in Central Park, visible in the distance, Kessler said. She knew the schedules of regular passers-by, gave them names, and imagined their lives. There was a man who walked his dog every morning at 8:15. She called him Mr. Punctual and worried when he missed a day. The cruelest aspect was the proximity to normal life. Clara could hear the household below, the dinner parties, the music, the laughter. She could hear her mother's voice giving instructions to servants, her father's heavy footsteps in the hallway. Most painful were the sounds of Constance being prepared for social events, the rustle of expensive gowns, the excited chatter of maids helping with hair and jewelry. Kessler produced a stack of pages, thin paper covered in careful handwriting. I saved portions of her journals. After I was dismissed, I took them. I suppose I stole them, technically, but I couldn't let everything disappear. Lyons read the entries, Clara's voice reaching across decades. One passage from June of 1897, when she was 17, struck him particularly hard. Constance visited today and described the opera. She says I would love the music, that my soul is made for beautiful things, even if my body cannot go where beauty lives. She cried when she left, though she tried to hide it. I told her not to be sad, that I have books and thoughts and the view from my window. But the truth, which I did not tell her, is that sometimes I stand at the window and imagine simply stepping through it, falling into that world below, even if only for the seconds it would take to reach the ground. Kessler's voice cracked. She never complained, not really. But you could see the weight of it, year after year, watching life happen to everyone but her. The nurse described how servants who accidentally discovered Clara's existence were immediately dismissed with significant payments and threats of legal action. The house staff learned to avoid the 4th floor entirely. Those who knew anything understood that speaking about it meant financial ruin. In October of 1904, everything changed. Constance's engagement had been announced, and the mansion buzzed with wedding preparations. Cornelius Vanderveer summoned Kessler to his study. "He told me my services were no longer required," she said. Clara was being moved to more secure accommodations. When I asked what that meant, he said it was no longer my concern. He gave me $5,000 and a train ticket to Boston. I was to leave the next morning and never return to New York. She looked at Lyons with tears in her eyes. I should have refused. I should have taken Clara and run. Consequences be damned. Instead, I took the money and left. I've lived with that choice every day since. The last time Kessler saw Clara, the girl was being led down the stairs by two men she didn't recognize. Clara had looked back once, her face calm, resigned. She mouthed two words. It's all right. But it wasn't all right. It would never be all right again. The letters came from an unexpected source. A Manhattan antique dealer named Vincent Harrow contacted Detective Lyons 3 weeks after the discovery, asking for a discreet meeting. When they met in a cafe near Washington Square, Harrow produced a small wooden box he claimed to have purchased from an estate sale in 1928. The Vanderveer estate, Harrow explained. After the parents died, the house was being cleared. I bought several boxes of miscellaneous items, papers mostly, thinking there might be valuable documents. Found this hidden in a false bottom of a writing desk. Inside were 43 letters, written on expensive stationery, tied together with faded ribbon. The exchanges spanned from 1892, when the twins were 12, through September of 1904. All were written in two distinct hands, one elegant and flowing, the other slightly uneven, showing the effort of someone writing with physical difficulty. The earliest letters revealed how the sisters communicated. Constance would slip notes under Clara's door during her secret visits, and Clara would respond, leaving her replies in a specific location for her sister to collect. The content started innocently, with Constance describing her dance lessons and Clara sharing what she had read in her latest book. A letter from May of 1893 showed their deepening bond. Constance wrote, "Today I told Mother I wanted to stay home from the Whitfield party because I had a headache. Instead, I spent 3 hours with you. We played cards and you beat me twice at chess. I think those 3 hours meant more than all the parties I have ever attended. Sometimes I wonder which of us is truly imprisoned." Clara's response, dated 2 days later, demonstrated both her intelligence and her heartbreaking acceptance. "You must not think such things. You are meant for the world Father has given you. I have made peace with my place. Your visits bring me more happiness than you know, but I would not have you sacrifice your life to share my limitations. Promise me you will always choose the parties, the dancing, the life you deserve." But as the years progressed, the letters grew more complex. In 1897, Constance wrote about potential suitors, asking Clara's opinion on each one. Clara's responses showed keen insight into human nature, despite her isolation. She accurately predicted which men sought Constance for her fortune and which genuinely cared for her character. One letter from February of 1900 revealed Constance's growing awareness of the injustice. "I see you reading your books, thinking your thoughts, showing more wit and kindness than anyone I meet in society. Yet you remain here while I am celebrated for merely existing with an acceptable face. What kind of world have we been born into, where an accident of bone structure determines everything?" Clara's reply cut to the heart of their situation. "It is not bone structure alone, sister. It is Father's fear and Mother's silence. It is a society that values appearance over substance. But we cannot change what we were born into. We can only choose how we respond. You respond with grace and strength. I respond with acceptance. Neither of us is wrong." The letters from 1903 and 1904 took on new urgency. Constance was 23, facing increased pressure to marry. Her father had begun selecting suitable candidates, arranging introductions, making it clear her choice of husband must meet his exacting standards. When William Ashford entered her life, Constance wrote to Clara immediately. "He is handsome, wealthy, and kind. Father approves completely. Mother is planning the wedding already. But Clara, I cannot stop thinking that marrying him means leaving this house. It means leaving you." Clara's response, dated March 19th, 1904, the day Constance's engagement was announced, showed both wisdom and resignation. "You must marry him. You must have the life you were meant for. I will be fine, truly. Mrs. Kessler takes good care of me, and I have my books and my window. Do not let concern for me prevent your happiness. That would break my heart more than anything else ever could." But later letters revealed Constance's growing anxiety. She wrote about her father's strange behavior, his meetings with contractors, his questions about soundproofing and ventilation. She mentioned overhearing him discuss construction work with men who visited late at night. The final letter in the collection was dated September 8th, 1904. Constance's handwriting showed distress, the normally perfect script shaking and uneven. "They are moving you tomorrow. Father told me this morning. He says the wedding preparations require your rooms for guests, but I know that is a lie. He has built something, Clara. Something behind the ballroom wall. I heard him tell Mother it is the only way to ensure complete security. I begged him to reconsider, but he would not hear me. Please forgive me. Please know that I never wanted this. I will find a way to change it. I swear to you." There was no response from Clara, no final letter to close their correspondence. The ribbon that tied the stack together appeared to have been added later, as if Constance had gathered them all after the fact, preserving the only proof that her sister's voice had ever existed. Lyons sat in his office reading and rereading the letters, trying to reconcile the caring sister they revealed with the woman who had remained silent while Clara died behind that wall. Whatever had happened in the months that followed, whatever choices Constance had made or failed to make, the letters proved she had once loved her twin enough to question the world that divided them. But love, as Clara herself might have written, is not always enough to overcome fear. The engagement of Constance Vanderveer to William Ashford brought unprecedented attention to the mansion at 742 Fifth Avenue. Society reporters requested house tours. Wedding planners needed access to measure the ballroom. Caterers, florists, and musicians required multiple consultations. The private fortress the Vanderveers had maintained for decades suddenly became a public stage. Cornelius Vanderveer's anxiety manifested in ways the household staff noticed immediately. The butler, Miles Grayson, later told investigators that his employer began drinking heavily in the evenings, something previously uncharacteristic. Edith Vanderveer grew increasingly withdrawn, spending hours in her private sitting room and refusing most social calls. The risk of discovery had never been higher. With contractors, decorators, and caterers moving through the house daily, the fourth floor became impossible to secure properly. Clara's rooms, previously accessed only by trusted staff, now stood dangerously close to areas where strangers worked. One servant's careless comment, one unlocked door, one curious worker, and the scandal would destroy everything Cornelius had spent 24 years protecting. William Ashford's family complicated matters further. The Ashfords maintained exacting standards for any union with their name. William's mother, Margaret, had begun her own investigation into the Vanderveer lineage, hiring a private researcher to verify the family's claims about their background. Such scrutiny was standard among wealthy families, but for Cornelius, it represented a threat that could unravel his carefully constructed deception. In June of 1904, Margaret Ashford asked Edith about children during a luncheon at the Plaza Hotel. The question, innocent enough on its surface, probed whether Edith's single successful pregnancy suggested potential difficulties for Constance. Edith's response, documented in a letter to her sister found in family papers, revealed her desperation. I told Margaret the first birth had been entirely uncomplicated, and the decision to have only one child had been purely personal preference. She seemed satisfied, but I could see calculation in her eyes. These people investigate everything. What if they discover the truth? What if someone from the old Westchester estate remembers something and talks? By August, Cornelius had made his decision. Records from the architectural firm of Hastings and Pierce show he commissioned plans for what he termed a private storage vault behind the ballroom's north wall. The specifications called for a sealed chamber approximately 10 feet square, with ventilation connecting to the main chimney system. The contractor's notes indicate Cornelius insisted on absolute discretion, paying triple the normal rate and requiring all work to be completed during evening hours when the house staff had been dismissed. Construction began in September. The work required 3 weeks, during which Cornelius fabricated explanations about ballroom renovations in preparation for the wedding. The chamber was designed with a hidden door concealed behind decorative paneling, accessible only to those who knew its precise location. Inside, workmen installed basic furnishings: a bed, a table, shelving, and a small ventilation grate. Ida Kessler's diary, recovered from her Brooklyn boarding house, documented the final days before Clara's relocation. The entry from October 4th described a conversation with Edith Vanderveer that left Kessler shaken. Mrs. Vanderveer came to Clara's rooms this afternoon, something she has not done in months. She did not speak to Clara directly, only to me. She said arrangements had been made for more secure accommodations. Clara would be moved next week, and my services would no longer be needed. When I asked about Clara's care, she said that had been arranged as well. Her voice was hollow, defeated. She looked at Clara once before leaving, and I saw something terrible in her face. Not love, not even pity, just resignation. Kessler's entry from October 10th recorded her dismissal. Cornelius had summoned her to his study, presented her with $5,000 in cash, and handed her a train ticket to Boston, dated for the following morning. The message was clear: leave New York immediately and never return. I asked who would care for Clara, Kessler wrote. He said a rotating staff would handle her needs, that everything had been planned to ensure her comfort and security. But his eyes would not meet mine. I pressed him, foolishly, asking how she would receive medical care or companionship. He stood then, his face turning hard, and told me I had been compensated generously for my years of discretion. He expected that discretion to continue permanently. The final entry in Kessler's diary, dated October 11th, described her last glimpse of Clara being escorted down the main staircase by 2 men she had never seen before. Clara wore a simple dress and carried a small bag of belongings. She appeared calm, almost serene, as if she had accepted whatever fate awaited her. Kessler tried to approach her, but Cornelius blocked her path. "Your train leaves in 2 hours," he said quietly. "I suggest you go pack." From the window of her room, Kessler watched Clara being led across the courtyard toward the servants' entrance that connected to the ballroom wing. The girl disappeared through the door, and Kessler never saw her again. The chamber was ready. The wedding was 6 months away. and Cornelius Vanir had solved his problem in the most permanent way imaginable. Clara would remain hidden, not just from society or visitors, but from existence itself. Behind the wall, sealed away from light and life, she would become what her father had always wanted her to be: nothing at all. Detective Lyons obtained the architectural firm's records through a court order in late April. The files from Hastings and Pierce revealed construction details that transformed the crime from abstract horror into concrete evidence of premeditated cruelty. The original commission, dated August 23, 1904, specified a private secure room to be built within existing ballroom space. The lead architect, Harold Pierce, had included detailed notes from his initial consultation with Cornelius Vanir. The conversation, preserved in Pierce's meticulous handwriting, showed a man planning his daughter's living tomb with the same attention he might give to wine cellar construction. Vanir had specified the chamber must be soundproof, ventilated through existing systems, to avoid external evidence, and accessible only through a concealed entrance. Pierce noted that his client seemed particularly concerned about the ventilation question, asking repeatedly whether the system would provide adequate air circulation for extended occupation. The blueprints showed the chamber's location precisely. It occupied space directly behind the ballroom's north wall, carved from what had been a storage area and servants' corridor. The room measured 9 feet by 11 feet, with an 8-foot ceiling. A single ventilation shaft, 4 inches in diameter, connected to the mansion's main chimney system, 3 floors up. Pierce's correspondence with the contractors revealed the construction timeline. Work began on September 15th, conducted exclusively between 8 in the evening and 4 in the morning. The crew consisted of 4 men, each paid $100 per week, 5 times the standard rate. They signed contracts requiring absolute silence about the project's nature and location. The bills of material told the story of how they built it. 300 bricks for the interior wall, mortar, plaster, sound-dampening insulation made from cork and felt. The hidden door used a mechanism borrowed from bank vault design, opening only when specific panels were pressed in sequence. From inside, no handle or mechanism existed. The door could be opened solely from the ballroom side. Inside the chamber, contractors installed basic necessities: an iron bed frame with a horsehair mattress, a small table and single chair, wooden shelving units attached directly to the walls, a chamber pot behind a folding screen, 2 oil lamps, though the invoices showed no provision for lamp oil resupply. The ventilation grate, positioned near the ceiling, measured 6 inches square. Most damning were the provisions for food delivery. The builders constructed a small panel in the wall, 12 inches square, that could be opened from the outside. It functioned like a primitive dumbwaiter, allowing items to be passed through without opening the main door or allowing visual contact. The panel's interior side was fitted with a metal plate that could be slid aside by the occupant to retrieve whatever was placed there. Financial records revealed Vanir's plan for Clara's maintenance. Beginning in November of 1904, his personal accounts showed weekly payments of $10 to a man named Joseph Reeves, listed only as household contractor. These payments continued without interruption until September of 1905, then stopped abruptly. Lyons tracked Reeves through city directories. He had worked as a general handyman and had died in 1918. But his widow, Elizabeth Reeves, was still alive, residing in a nursing home in Queens. When Lyons visited her, she initially refused to discuss her late husband's work for the Vandirs. Only when shown photographs of Clara's remains did she finally speak. "Joseph never told me exactly what he was doing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But he came home every Sunday evening with $10 cash and a face that showed he hated himself. He would drink until he passed out. This went on for months. She described her husband's routine. Every Sunday at 6 in the evening, he entered the Vanir mansion through the servants' entrance. He carried a basket containing food for the week: bread, cheese, dried meat, canned goods, water in sealed bottles. He would access the ballroom, open the concealed panel, and place the supplies inside. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. He never saw her, Elizabeth said. Never spoke to her. Mr. Vanderveer's instructions were absolute. No communication, no acknowledgement. Just leave the food and go. But Joseph said he could hear her sometimes, heard her moving around in there. Once, he heard her crying. In September of 1905, Cornelius Vanderveer summoned Reeves and informed him the arrangement was ending. He paid Reeves an additional $500 and made clear that discussing the work would result in criminal prosecution for trespassing and theft, charges Vanderveer would fabricate if necessary. Joseph took the money, Elizabeth continued. But something broke in him after that. He knew what stopping those deliveries meant. He knew someone was in that room, and he knew what would happen when the food stopped coming. The construction records, the financial payments, the witness testimony, all of it painted a clear picture. Cornelius Vanderveer had built a prison designed for permanent occupation. He had arranged for minimal sustenance to be delivered weekly. And he had done all of this while simultaneously planning his daughter's wedding, selecting flowers and musicians, approving menu choices for a celebration that would take place mere feet from where Clara sat in darkness. The question that haunted Lyons was simple. Had Vanderveer always planned for the food deliveries to stop? Had the chamber been designed from the beginning as a tomb, with the weekly provisions merely postponing the inevitable? Or had something changed in September of 1905 that made Clara's continued existence impossible? The answer lay in understanding what happened at Constance's wedding and what came immediately after. June 10, 1905, dawned clear and warm across Manhattan. The society pages had devoted weeks to anticipating this wedding, and the day itself exceeded every expectation. By noon, carriages lined Fifth Avenue for 3 blocks in each direction. The Vanderveer mansion blazed with flowers, 10,000 white roses imported from greenhouses in Connecticut. The New York Times sent 2 reporters to cover the event. Their accounts, published the following day, described a ceremony of unprecedented elegance. Constance wore a gown of ivory silk with a 15-foot train embroidered with seed pearls. Her veil, secured with a diamond tiara borrowed from her mother's collection, cascaded nearly to the floor. As she walked down the aisle, created through the center of the ballroom, guests whispered that they had never seen a more beautiful bride. What the reporters did not mention, what no guest could have known, was that the ceremony took place within feet of the sealed chamber. The north wall, decorated that day with elaborate floral arrangements and silk swags, concealed Clara behind 2 feet of brick and plaster. The ventilation grate that provided her only connection to the outside world carried every sound directly to where she sat. The journal of the ceremony, preserved in the Ashford family archives, provided a minute-by-minute account. The string quartet began playing at 2:30. Guests took their seats. At precisely 3 o'clock, the wedding march commenced. Constance walked toward William Ashford, her face composed and lovely, her steps measured and graceful. During the vows, several guests later recalled that Constance paused slightly before saying, "I do." The hesitation lasted perhaps 2 seconds, barely noticeable. The Reverend repeated the question. This time, Constance's voice rang clear and strong. "I do." Behind the wall, Clara heard everything. The music, the vows, the applause. She heard her sister promise to love and honor William Ashford. She heard 500 guests celebrating a union that would take Constance away from the mansion, away from Fifth Avenue, away from any possibility of helping the twin she had once promised to protect. A guest named Dorothy Sinclair wrote about the reception in her personal diary, an entry discovered decades later among her effects. She described Constance moving through the celebration with mechanical grace, smiling at appropriate moments but seeming distant. The bride appeared almost to be watching herself from outside her own body, Sinclair wrote. She accepted congratulations with perfect courtesy, but her eyes held a sadness that no amount of champagne or joy could disguise. Multiple witnesses mentioned Constance's strange behavior near the north wall. 3 separate accounts describe her standing alone there during the reception, one hand pressed flat against the silk-covered paneling. When guests approached to speak with her, she would smile and move away. But she returned to that spot repeatedly throughout the evening. The reception lasted until midnight. Toasts were made. The couple cut a 6-tier cake. They danced their first waltz as husband and wife while the crowd applauded. Cornelius Vanderveer, flushed with champagne and satisfaction, announced that his daughter had married into one of America's finest families. Edith Vanderveer sat in a corner, her face pale, speaking to no one. At 11:30, Constance went upstairs to change from her wedding gown into traveling clothes. The couple planned to spend their wedding night at the Waldorf Astoria before departing for a European honeymoon the following week. As she prepared to leave her childhood home, possibly for the last time, servants later reported hearing her crying in her room. When she descended the stairs 30 minutes later, composed once more, she paused at the ballroom entrance. Most guests had departed by then. The remaining family members and close friends were gathering their belongings. Constance walked directly to the north wall one final time. A housemaid named Sarah Brennan, who was beginning to clear glasses and plates, swore in her later testimony that she heard Constance whisper something to the wall itself. Though Brennan could not make out the exact words, she distinctly heard Constance say, "Forgive me," before turning away. William Ashford called to his bride from the front entrance. Constance joined him. They climbed into their carriage, and the assembled well-wishers cheered as they departed. The wedding everyone would remember as the social triumph of the season was over. Behind the wall, in absolute darkness, Clara sat among the remnants of that week's food delivery. She had heard her sister's wedding. She had heard the promises, the music, the celebration. And perhaps, pressed against the brick near the concealed door, she had heard those final whispered words of apology. The journal found with Clara's remains contained one entry dated June 11th. Just 5 words, written in her careful, unsteady script. "Constance is married. I listened." Nothing further appeared on that page, but in the margin, so faint the investigators almost missed it, Clara had drawn a small symbol. A single heart, broken cleanly in half. The announcement appeared in the New York Times on September 16, 1905. Constance Vanderveer Ashford, age 25, had died suddenly of influenza while visiting her parents' country estate in Westchester. The obituary praised her grace, her charitable work, and her brief but happy marriage. Services would be private, limited to immediate family. The death certificate, filed with Westchester County 3 days later, listed the cause as respiratory failure secondary to influenza. The attending physician, Dr. Edmund Walsh, signed the document. The burial took place at the family plot in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery on September 20th. with only Cornelius, Edith, and William Ashford in attendance. But Constance Vanderveer Ashford did not die in September of 1905. She would live another 42 years, dying peacefully in Newport, Rhode Island, in 1947, at the age of 67. The woman who died that September, whose body was never properly examined, whose funeral was rushed and private, was her twin sister Clara. The evidence lay in the sealed chamber itself. When forensic specialists examined the scene in 1932, they found details that told Clara's final story. The newspapers scattered across the floor dated from late August and early September of 1905. The empty food tins showed the last delivery had occurred on September 3rd. After that date, nothing. The medical examiner's analysis of Clara's remains revealed she had died of dehydration and starvation, a process that would have taken 7 to 10 days after the water supply ended. The positioning of the skeleton suggested she had died near the concealed door, perhaps hoping until her final moments that it would open, that food would come, that someone would remember she existed. The scratch marks near the door told their own story. Fresh gouges in the wood, made by fingernails, showed Clara had tried desperately to escape as her strength failed. Chemical analysis of residue found in the marks indicated they were made in the days immediately before her death, when panic finally overcame the resignation she had maintained for so long. Joseph Reeves had made his final delivery on September 3rd. When Detective Lyons cross-referenced this date with other records, a pattern emerged. Constance and William had returned from their honeymoon on August 28th. They had stayed at the mansion for 5 days before departing for the Ashford family estate in Connecticut. During those 5 days, Constance would have known her sister was behind that wall, would have known the food deliveries were her only lifeline. On September 2nd, according to household records, Constance had a private meeting with her father in his study. No servants were present, but the butler noted that Constance emerged from that meeting with tears streaming down her face. She left the mansion the following morning and never returned. The last food delivery occurred that same evening. After September 3rd, Cornelius Vanderveer dismissed Joseph Reeves permanently. No replacement was ever hired. The concealed panel was never opened again until demolition workers discovered it 27 years later. Clara died sometime between September 10th and September 13th, alone in absolute darkness, with no water, no food, and no hope of rescue. Her final journal entry, dated September 9th, showed her awareness of what was happening. The food did not come last Sunday, or the Sunday before. I have water for perhaps 2 more days. I understand now what Father has decided. Constance is married and gone. Mother never acknowledged me. I am the secret that must disappear completely. I am not angry. I am only sad that I will die having never felt sunlight on my face, having never walked down Fifth Avenue, having never lived one single day as anything other than a mistake to be hidden. The entry continued with instructions for anyone who might find her remains. She asked that Constance not be blamed, that her sister had tried to help within the impossible constraints of their situation. She requested her journals be preserved so that someone, someday, would know she had existed and had thoughts and feelings and dreams despite everything. "Tell Constance I forgive her," Clara wrote. "Tell her I understand the world gave her no real choice. Tell her I loved her until the very end." The false death certificate for Constance served multiple purposes. It allowed the Vanderveers to explain their daughter's distress and absence in the months following the wedding. It provided William Ashford with a tragic story, that garnered sympathy rather than questions. Most importantly, it created an official record of death for the Vanir daughter, satisfying anyone who might later wonder about family genealogy. The real Constance lived with her husband in New York, then Newport, maintaining distance from her parents. Cornelius and Edith Vanir grew old in their mansion, hosting fewer parties as years passed, eventually dying within months of each other in 1927. They took their secret to the grave, believing it would remain buried forever. But secrets built into walls have a way of surviving longer than the people who create them. Clara's tomb became her testimony. Her bones, her journal, her scratch marks near the door, all of it spoke louder than any words could. The woman denied life would have the final word in death, her story emerging from darkness into light, forcing the world to acknowledge what had been done to her. The death certificate for Constance Vanir Ashford, filed in 1905, was a lie. But it was a lie that revealed a truth far more terrible than any official document could capture. Detective Lyons presented his findings to the district attorney on May 3, 1932. The evidence was overwhelming. Architectural records, financial documents, witness testimony, and Clara's own words preserved in her journals. Within a week, investigators traveled to Newport to interview Constance Vanir Ashford. She was 62 years old, a widow of considerable wealth, respected in Newport society. When detectives arrived at her mansion overlooking the Atlantic, she received them in her drawing room with the same composure she had maintained throughout her life. Before they could explain their purpose, she spoke first. "You found her. I have been waiting 27 years for someone to find her." The interrogation lasted 3 days. Court stenographers recorded every word, creating a transcript that would remain sealed for decades, but eventually enter the public record. Constance's testimony revealed the full scope of her knowledge and complicity, painting a portrait of a woman trapped between love for her sister and fear of her father. She confirmed she had known about the sealed chamber from the beginning. Her father had told her in October of 1904, presenting it as a temporary measure until after the wedding. He claimed Clara would be moved to a private facility upstate, where she could receive proper care away from the scrutiny marriage would bring to the family. "I wanted to believe him," Constance testified. "I needed to believe him because the alternative was unbearable. But I knew. Even then, I knew he was lying." She described visiting the concealed panel during her engagement, speaking to Clara through the wall late at night, when the household slept. Clara's voice would come through faintly, reassuring her sister, telling her not to worry, maintaining the gentle acceptance that had characterized her entire imprisoned life. After the wedding, Constance and William departed for their honeymoon. When they returned in late August, she immediately sensed something had changed. Her father refused to discuss Clara, growing angry when Constance pressed him. Her mother would not meet her eyes. On September 2nd, Constance confronted Cornelius in his study. The conversation, as she recounted it, marked the moment when denial became impossible. "I demanded to know when Clara would be moved to the facility he had promised. He told me there was no facility. There had never been any plan, except the chamber. When I threatened to tell William everything, to expose what he had done, he reminded me that I had been complicit. I had known Clara was behind that wall during my wedding. I had accepted her imprisonment to secure my own future. If the truth emerged, I would be destroyed along with him." That night, Constance tried to access the concealed panel. Her father had changed the mechanism. She could not open it. She stood in the empty ballroom, placing her hands against the wall, knowing her sister was dying behind it and being powerless to help. "I should have told William. I should have gone to the police. I should have torn down that wall with my own hands. Instead, I left. I convinced myself Clara was already beyond saving, that exposing the crime would destroy more lives without bringing her back. I chose silence. I chose my own survival. She lived with that choice for 42 years. Her marriage to William lasted until his death in 1938. They had no children, a decision Constance attributed to her inability to trust herself with another life dependent on her protection. She never returned to the Fifth Avenue mansion after September of 1905. The legal question of prosecution proved complex. Constance had been 25 at the time of Clara's death, legally an adult, but practically powerless against her father's authority and wealth. She had not built the chamber, had not ordered the food deliveries stopped, had not directly caused her sister's death. Her crime was silence, complicity, self-preservation at the cost of another's life. The district attorney ultimately declined to file charges. Cornelius and Edith Vanderveer were dead. Prosecuting an elderly woman for failing to prevent a murder 3 decades earlier presented insurmountable legal and practical challenges. But the court of public opinion rendered its own verdict. Constance's name became synonymous with cowardice and betrayal. She used her considerable wealth to establish the Clara Vanderveer Foundation, dedicated to protecting vulnerable individuals from family abuse and neglect. She funded institutions, legal aid services, and advocacy groups. She gave interviews acknowledging her failure and warning others against the moral compromises wealth and social position could impose. On June 15, 1932, Clara's remains were exhumed from the false grave in Sleepy Hollow and given a proper burial. The new headstone read, Clara Vanderveer, 1880 to 1905. Hidden in life, remembered in death. May her story ensure no one else suffers in silence. Hundreds attended the funeral. Constance stood at the graveside, supported by attendants, and spoke briefly. My sister was kinder, smarter, and braver than I ever was. She deserved the life that was given to me. I will spend whatever time I have left ensuring her death means something. The case transformed how society understood family secrets and the price of reputation. Clara's journals were published in edited form, becoming required reading in social work programs. Her story exposed the darkness beneath Gilded Age glamour, the human cost of maintaining appearances, and the particular vulnerability of those deemed imperfect by arbitrary standards. Constance died in 1947, leaving her entire estate to the foundation bearing her sister's name. Her obituary mentioned her charitable work, but could not escape her past. She was buried beside Clara in Sleepy Hollow, the twins finally reunited, the perfect and the hidden resting side by side. The Vanderveer mansion was demolished as planned, replaced by an apartment building that still stands today. But on the northern wall of the lobby, a bronze plaque commemorates Clara Vanderveer and the 25 years she spent imprisoned behind walls built by the people who should have protected her. Some stories end with justice. This one ended with remembrance. Perhaps for Clara, denied everything else. That was enough. If this story disturbed you, if it made you think about the secrets families keep and the price of silence, then hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because we are not done exposing the darkness hidden in history's most respectable places. Share this story. Let Clara's voice reach further than the walls that confined her. And remember, the most terrifying monsters are not the ones in horror films. They are the ones who sit at dinner tables, who build mansions, who smile for photographs while burying the truth where they hope no one will ever find it. But we will keep digging, We will keep finding them, and we will keep telling their stories until there is nowhere left to hide.